The ancient oak tree creaked as Emma Wilson tested the ropes binding her wrists. 5 teenagers formed a semicircle around her, their shadows stretching long across Memorial Park's abandoned clearing. Ashley Baker stepped forward, her cheerleader's ponytails swinging like a pendulum as she leaned in close. "Last chance. Charity case. Get us those pills from your mom's hospital, or tomorrow everyone sees what a pathetic freak you really are." Emma's chin trembled, but her eyes remained defiant. "I won't." "It's wrong." Ashley's palm cracked against Emma's cheek, the sound echoing through the trees. None of them noticed the limping figure watching from the underbrush, a gaunt German shepherd, scarred and dirty, with intelligent eyes that had seen too much suffering to ignore it now. The dog's muscles tensed beneath his matted fur. Something about the small girl's quiet courage awakened memories long buried. His damaged hind leg trembled as he lowered himself, preparing to move. The world was about to change for everyone in that clearing. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. Oak Ridge, Pennsylvania wore its fading charm like an old sweater, comfortable, frayed at the edges, with a few holes nobody talked about. Once a thriving mill town, it now survived on nostalgia and the carefully maintained fiction that everyone was doing just fine. The town square boasted flags and flower beds, while just 6 blocks away, families like the Wilsons struggled to keep their lights on. Maverick hadn't always been nameless. 5 years ago, his photo had appeared in newspapers nationwide, the heroic rescue dog who'd located 12 survivors in the rubble of the Houston Grand Plaza collapse. His handler, Jake Myers, had called him the best partner he'd ever had. That was before the final rescue, before the ceiling beam that crushed Maverick's hind leg, before Jake rushed back into the building one last time and never emerged. The rescue team had tried to keep Maverick, but his inconsolable howling and depression made him unadoptable. Eventually, he'd been left at a shelter 2 states away, his Medal of Valor tossed in with his paperwork. Emma Wilson had her own battles. At 11, she managed their household schedule with the precision of a military officer. She woke at 5:30 to give Timmy his morning medications, prepared his special allergen-free breakfast, and still made it to Oak Ridge Middle School by 7:45, homework complete. Her mother, Sarah, worked double shifts at Oak Ridge Memorial Hospital, coming home just long enough to sleep before returning to the understaffed nurses' station. Emma never complained. She'd overheard enough late-night phone calls about medical bills to understand why her mother's eyes carried permanent shadows. Benjamin Miller, coach. To everyone, though he'd never technically coached anything, watched over Emma from his post in the school library. The Vietnam veteran recognized something in the girl's quiet determination, the way she carried responsibility without bending. He'd started saving newspaper articles about strong women for her to read during lunch periods spent hiding from Ashley Baker and her followers. Sheriff Frank Donovan knew everyone's secrets in Oak Ridge, including which ones to pretend not to see. Mayor Richard Baker's annual contributions to the department's equipment fund ensured certain complaints disappeared from official records. Donovan told himself this compromise kept the peace in a town that couldn't afford disruption. Some nights, he even managed to believe it. None of them could have predicted how one limping dog would unravel everything they'd accepted as normal in Oak Ridge. The morning of what would become the longest day of Emma Wilson's life began like any other. She awoke before her alarm, instinctively reaching for the medication chart she'd created using colored markers and poster board. Timmy's 6 a.m. immunoglobulin supplement needed to be mixed precisely. Too much would make him nauseous. Too little wouldn't protect his fragile immune system. Emma measured the powder with practiced care, adding exactly 4 ounces of purified water before stirring it into his favorite dinosaur cup. "Rise and shine, buddy," she whispered, gently shaking her brother's shoulder. Timmy's eyes fluttered open, unfocused for a moment, before finding his sister's face. At 7, he already understood more about illness than most adults. He took the medicine without complaint, his small fingers wrapping around Emma's wrist in silent gratitude. "Is Mom home yet?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "She'll be back after her shift. I made you cinnamon oatmeal." Emma kept her voice cheerful, not mentioning that cinnamon oatmeal was all they had left until payday, "and Mrs. Grayson next door will check on you at lunch." 5 blocks away, a German shepherd was waking beneath the playground equipment at Memorial Park. Maverick's dreams had been filled with smoke and falling concrete again, leaving him restless and alert before dawn. His morning ritual never varied, first checking his territory for other strays, then limping to the back of Donnelly's diner where the morning cook sometimes left scraps. Today, the dumpster yielded half a breakfast sandwich and some bacon ends. Maverick ate methodically, conserving energy, aware that each day required careful planning when you had 3 functioning legs instead of 4. The dog had survived 3 months in Oak Ridge, longer than he'd managed anywhere since escaping the shelter. Something about this town felt familiar, though he couldn't know it was because the pace and population resembled the small Texas community where he'd trained as a puppy. Here, people mostly left him alone. The animal control officer drove slowly enough that Maverick could always find cover, and several residents accidentally left water bowls on their porches. Emma finished packing Timmy's lunch, a sandwich cut into puzzle pieces the way he liked, and grabbed her worn backpack. Last night's homework was neatly completed despite the power having gone out for 2 hours. She'd finished her math by flashlight, determined not to give Ms. Peterson any reason to call home. The morning sunlight caught in her light brown hair as she locked the front door, double-checking the spare key hidden for Timmy's caregiver. The walk to Oak Ridge Middle School took exactly 17 minutes at Emma's pace. She'd memorized which houses had dogs that barked and which corners the school bus turned at, timing her journey to minimize any chance of encountering Ashley Baker and her friends. This morning, her careful planning failed. "Well, if it isn't Charity Case," came the familiar voice from behind the convenience store. Ashley stepped out, flanked by Madison and Tyler, their expensive sneakers and designer backpacks broadcasting everything Emma's family lacked. "Where's your bodyguard today?" "Oh, wait. You don't have one." Emma clutched her backpack strap tighter, eyes fixed on the sidewalk ahead. Just 9 more blocks. "I'm talking to you." Ashley moved with the confident grace of someone who'd never questioned her place in the world. At 14, she already wielded her father's influence like a weapon. "We need to discuss a business opportunity." "I have to get to school," Emma murmured, trying to sidestep the trio. Tyler, a head taller than Emma with his father's broad football shoulders, blocked her path. "My cousin got prescribed Oxy when he broke his arm. Sold them for $20 each. Your mom's got access to all kinds of good stuff at the hospital." Emma's stomach clenched. "My mom's a nurse. She helps people." Ashley's laugh held no humor. "And we're giving you a chance to help yourself. Everyone knows your little brother's the reason you wear the same 3 shirts all year. Wouldn't it be nice to afford something that didn't come from the church donation bin?" "I have to go." Emma attempted to push past, but Madison grabbed her backpack, unzipping it and dumping its contents onto the sidewalk. Papers, pencils, and her carefully completed homework scattered across the concrete. "Think about it," Ashley said, stepping deliberately on Emma's math worksheet. "All you need to do is borrow a few pills from your mom's hospital. Nobody would even notice. Otherwise," she smiled, a shark sensing blood, "we might have to pay your brother a visit while your mom's working." The threat hung in the air like smoke as they sauntered away, leaving Emma to gather her belongings with trembling hands. 3 miles across town, Benjamin Miller arrived at the school library to begin his morning routine. The former military policeman had found peace among the books after decades of nightmares. At 68, his tall frame remained military straight, his white hair clipped short in the same style he'd worn since 1970. The students called him Coach, partly because of his authoritative presence, but mostly because he was the only adult who consistently showed up at their games and performances, regardless of which team was playing. He noticed Emma's absence immediately. In 3 years, she had never missed their morning check-in, a tradition that began when he found her hiding from bullies behind the biography section. Today, her usual table sat empty. The copy of Women in Science he'd set aside, still waiting at her place. Maverick's midday scavenging route typically avoided the busier parts of town, but something drew him toward the school that afternoon. Perhaps it was the unusual cluster of police cars, or some buried instinct from his training days. He settled in the shadow of an oak tree across from the playground, watching as adults moved with the urgent purpose he recognized from disaster sites. Sheriff Donovan stood beside his cruiser, speaking into his radio while deliberately avoiding the gaze of the distraught librarian gesturing emphatically beside him. "Frank, she's not the type to skip school," Coach Miller insisted. "Something's wrong. Emma Wilson would never leave her brother alone. Ben, we've got protocols. She's probably just playing hooky like kids do. I can't put out an alert until she's been missing 8 hours." The sheriff's tone carried the weariness of a man reciting rules he didn't create. "Since when do you care about protocols when it's one of your fishing buddy's kids? Call it in. Frank, now." Their argument faded as Maverick's attention shifted to a group of teenagers lounging by the fence. The blonde girl was laughing, showing something on her phone to the others. The dog's ears perked forward, an old training response to unusual behavior patterns. Sarah Wilson received the call during her 3rd straight shift. The hospital was understaffed again, leaving her responsible for 16 patients on the geriatric ward. She pressed the phone to her ear, face paling as she listened to Coach Miller's voice. "Emma didn't come to school, but she left this morning. She always walks Timmy through his breathing exercises before she goes." The panic rose in her throat. "I can't leave right now. Mr. Miller, there's no one to cover, and these patients..." The hospital administrator, Dr. James Reynolds, happened to pass as she spoke, his attention sharpening at the mention of Emma. He gestured for Sarah to wrap up the call, his practiced smile never reaching his eyes. "Family emergency?" he asked with manufactured concern. "My daughter didn't show up at school. I need to find someone to cover my shift." Dr. Reynolds placed a sympathetic hand on her shoulder. "Let's not overreact. Teenagers often test boundaries. Tell you what, finish your shift. And I'll personally make sure the sheriff prioritizes looking into it." The way he said it made it clear this wasn't a suggestion. Sarah nodded mutely. Knowing her job and the health insurance Timmy desperately needed hung in the balance. As afternoon shadows lengthened, Emma Wilson sat tied to an ancient oak tree in the abandoned section of Memorial Park, the very place where Maverick had been sleeping just hours before. Ashley and 4 other students, including her boyfriend Jason, a high school junior, surrounded her. "You should have just said yes this morning," Ashley sighed, examining her manicure. "Now we have to make an example of you." "My brother needs me," Emma pleaded, the rope cutting into her wrists. "He has to take his medication." Jason laughed, pulling out his phone. "Should have thought about that before you decided to be difficult. You're staying here until you agree to get us those pills." "Or until you learn your lesson," Madison added, her voice carrying a cruelty that seemed at odds with her cheerleading uniform. Emma thought of Timmy alone at home, waiting for her return. She thought of her mother, working to save others while her own children were in danger. The tears she'd been holding back finally spilled over. "Please," she whispered. "I'll do anything else." A twig snapped at the edge of the clearing, drawing everyone's attention. At first, they saw nothing, just shadows and underbrush. Then, a pair of amber eyes appeared, followed by the gaunt form of a large German shepherd. The dog's fur was matted in places, and his right hind leg dragged slightly, but there was nothing weak about the low growl emerging from his throat. Maverick had been following the scent of fear since midday, his training recognizing the distress chemicals humans unconsciously emit when terrified. It had led him here, to this clearing where everything in his being told him someone needed help. As he watched the scene unfold, memories of his handler's voice echoed in his mind. "Find them, Mav. Find the ones who need us." The dog stood perfectly still, assessing the situation with the calculated precision that had once made him legendary in rescue circles. The small girl tied to the tree was the source of the fear scent. The others were threats. His powerful brain, trained to make split-second decisions in disaster zones, began formulating an approach. Emma saw the dog first, a flicker of recognition crossing her face. She had seen this animal before, not in person, but in a photograph. Coach Miller had shown her newspaper clippings about service animals for a school project, and she remembered the story of the heroic rescue dog from Houston. Though thinner now, with a damaged leg, the distinctive white blaze on his chest was unmistakable. "Maverick," she whispered, the name escaping her lips before she could think. The German shepherd's ears twitched forward at the sound of a name he hadn't heard in years. In that moment, something shifted in the atmosphere of the clearing, a silent acknowledgement between girl and dog that would alter the course of everything that followed. Maverick's mind flashed to a training exercise from years before. His handler Jake standing in a smoky room, voice calm despite the chaos. "Assessment first, Mav. Never rush in without a plan." The German shepherd remained motionless in the underbrush, taking inventory of the clearing. 5 teenagers, the blonde leader, 2 other girls, and 2 boys, including the larger one with something metallic glinting in his pocket. 1 victim, secured to the tree with what appeared to be jump ropes and a leather belt. The clearing had 3 potential exit routes, with the densest cover to the north. "What is that?" Madison's voice pitched higher, pointing toward the dog. "Is it rabid?" Jason stepped forward, shoulders squaring in manufactured confidence. "It's just some stray. Probably looking for food." He picked up a stick and tossed it toward Maverick. "Get out of here, mutt." The stick landed harmlessly several feet from the dog, who didn't flinch. Maverick's training had included ignoring distractions in disaster zones, fallen debris, loud noises, even fires. A teenager with a stick barely registered as a threat. His eyes remained locked on Emma, gauging her condition. "I don't like this," Tyler muttered, looking nervously at the dog's size, though thin from months on the streets. Maverick still carried the powerful build of a working German shepherd. "That thing looks like it could tear someone up." "Don't be such a baby," Ashley snapped, though she took a small step backward. "Jason, make it leave." Jason pulled out his phone. "I'm calling my cousin. He'll bring his pit bull that'll scare it off." Emma felt a flicker of hope watching the teenager's confidence waver. The dog Maverick, if she was right, seemed to be assessing the situation with uncanny intelligence. His damaged leg trembled slightly with the effort of standing still, but his gaze never wavered. "Please," Emma said quietly to the animal, not sure if he could even hear her. "Please, help me." Something in her voice triggered another memory for Maverick, a woman trapped under concrete after the Houston collapse, whispering those exact words as he'd discovered her location. The familiar phrase activated years of training. Maverick began a slow, deliberate circle of the clearing, keeping a consistent distance from the teenagers while analyzing the fastest approach to Emma. "What's it doing?" Madison whispered, backing toward Ashley. "It's stalking us," Tyler said, panic edging into his voice. "Like on those nature shows." Jason pocketed his phone, clearly unsettled by the dog's strategic movement. "We should just leave her. Come back later." "No," Ashley hissed. "My dad said we need to make sure she understands what happens to people who don't cooperate. If we let her go now, she'll just tell someone." Emma's wrists burned where the ropes cut into them. She'd been working at the knots for over an hour, but the teenagers had used multiple layers, securing them with the kind of overcompensation that came from inexperience. Her thoughts kept returning to Timmy, alone and waiting for his afternoon medication. Mrs. Grayson would check on him at lunchtime, but the elderly neighbor often dozed off and might not notice if Timmy's condition worsened. Maverick completed his circle. Having identified the weakest point in the teenager's formation, the space between Madison and the smallest boy, who kept glancing nervously at his phone. The dog lowered himself slightly, weight shifting to his front legs to compensate for his damaged hind quarter. The calculated movement was imperceptible to untrained eyes, but to anyone familiar with canine body language, he was clearly preparing to sprint. A distant car door slammed, momentarily distracting the teenagers. Maverick seized the opportunity. He launched forward with explosive speed that belied his injury, shooting through the gap between Madison and the smaller boy. His sudden movement sent Madison stumbling backward with a shriek, while the boy dropped his phone and scrambled away. "Jason!" Ashley screamed as the German shepherd positioned himself between Emma and the group, his stance widening as he planted his 3 good legs firmly on the ground. The low growl that emerged from Maverick's throat carried the unmistakable warning of a protection-trained animal. It wasn't the frantic barking of a yard dog, but the controlled threat display of a working canine. Jason hesitated, hand moving toward his pocket where the metal object, now clearly visible as a switchblade, was concealed. "Don't," Emma warned, recognizing the danger to the dog. "He's a trained rescue animal. He'll protect me." "It's just some mangy stray," Jason countered, but his voice lacked conviction. Maverick's growl deepened, teeth now visible, The smaller boy and Madison were already backing toward the path, clearly having reached their limit for this lesson. "We're leaving," the boy announced. "This is too weird." "Cowards," Ashley shouted, but made no move to stop them as they hurried away. "Fine. Go. Tyler and Jason are enough to handle one pathetic dog." But Tyler was already putting distance between himself and Maverick, whose focused intensity was becoming more unnerving by the second. "I didn't sign up for this. Ash, that dog looks like it means business. My dad will kill me if we don't finish this," Ashley insisted. But her voice had lost its earlier confidence. Jason made a critical error, pulling out his switchblade with a metallic click that echoed in the clearing. "I'll take care of it." The sound triggered something in Maverick's training. In disaster zones, the click of metal often preceded dangerous structural shifts. His response was immediate and decisive. He lunged forward with a controlled bark, not toward Jason, but toward the knife itself. A trained, disarming technique that sent the teenager stumbling backward in shock. Pain shot through Maverick's damaged leg with the sudden movement, causing him to falter momentarily. Fresh blood seeped through his fur where old wounds had reopened, but he maintained his protective stance, ignoring the agony with the single-minded focus that had once made him a rescue legend. "That thing's crazy," Tyler shouted, now fully retreating. "I'm out!" Jason backed away, knife still in hand but confidence shattered. "Ashley, let's go." "Fine." Ashley's face contorted with fury. "But this isn't over. Emma, you're dead at school, and I'm telling my dad everything." The three remaining teenagers retreated down the path, Ashley already dialing on her phone, her voice carrying back through the trees. "Daddy, we have a problem." When they disappeared from sight, Maverick turned his attention to Emma. The dog limped heavily now, his injured leg barely touching the ground as he approached her with gentle purpose. Emma remained perfectly still, unsure what to expect from this unexpected savior. "Maverick," she whispered again. "Are you him? The rescue dog from Houston?" The German shepherd's ears perked at the familiar name. He moved behind the tree, sniffing at the ropes that bound Emma's wrists. With careful precision, he began working at the knots with his teeth, the same technique he'd used to free survivors from debris. "You are him," Emma breathed in amazement. "We learned about you in school. Coach Miller showed me your picture. You saved 12 people when that building collapsed." Maverick continued methodically chewing through the ropes, occasionally glancing up at the paths to ensure the teenagers hadn't returned. His training had taught him to remain vigilant until a rescue was complete. "Your leg, you're bleeding," Emma observed with concern. The dog's injury was clearly causing him significant pain, fresh blood matting his fur with each movement. Yet he worked tirelessly at the ropes, finally breaking through the outer layer. As the pressure on her wrists eased, Emma managed to wiggle one hand free, quickly untying the remaining bindings herself. The moment she was loose, she knelt beside Maverick, gently examining his injured leg with careful hands. "Thank you," she said softly, her eyes filling with tears of relief and gratitude. "You saved me." The German shepherd sat patiently as she checked his wound, his training allowing him to tolerate examination despite the pain. The deep gash on his hind leg had reopened, and several patches of fur were missing entirely, revealing old scars beneath. "I need to get home to my brother," Emma explained, as if the dog could understand every word. "He needs his medication, but I'm going to help you too." Across town, Coach Miller was growing increasingly concerned. Emma's continued absence had prompted him to call the Wilson home, where he discovered Timmy alone except for an elderly neighbor who had fallen asleep on the couch. The boy was pale and anxious, clearly overdue for medication. "She always comes home right after school," Timmy explained, his small voice tight with worry. "She never forgets." Coach Miller helped the boy locate his afternoon medications, carefully following the color-coded chart Emma had created. As Timmy took the pills, the old librarian made another call to Sheriff Donovan. "Frank, I'm at the Wilson house. Emma's little brother is alone, and she's still missing. This isn't some teenage rebellion. Something's wrong." The sheriff's sigh carried through the phone. "Ben, I've got 2 deputies out looking already, but Mayor Baker just called a special budget meeting, and he's insisting I attend. Says it can't wait." "Since when does a budget meeting take priority over a missing child?" "You know how things work here," Donovan replied, his voice dropping. "Baker made it clear this is about next year's department funding. My hands are tied." Coach Miller's military training had taught him to recognize when official channels were compromised. "Fine, I'll handle it myself." He ended the call and turned to Timmy. "Your sister's probably just running late, but I'm going to go look for her. Mrs. Grayson will stay with you. Is there anywhere Emma might go if she was upset or in trouble?" Timmy thought for a moment. "Sometimes she goes to Memorial Park to read when Mom's working late. She says it's quiet there." In the fading afternoon light, Emma and Maverick made their way through the less traveled paths of the park. The dog limped beside her, occasionally stopping to listen for sounds of pursuit. Despite his injury, he remained alertly positioned between Emma and potential threats, his training evident in every calculated movement. "We need to avoid the main streets," Emma told him, instinctively keeping her voice low. "Ashley's dad is the mayor. If they're looking for us, that's where they'll be." Maverick seemed to understand, leading her toward a narrow trail that skirted the edge of the park. Emma noticed how he would pause at each intersection, looking back at her for direction, a behavior ingrained from years of working with human handlers. The tag hanging from the remains of Maverick's collar caught the light as he turned. Emma gently held it, reading the faded text, "Maverick, Houston Emergency Response Unit, Handler J. Myers." "What happened to you?" she wondered aloud. "How did a hero like you end up alone?" As if in answer, the German Shepherd pressed forward with renewed purpose, guiding Emma toward home and the brother who needed her, forging a connection that would soon challenge everything Oak Ridge thought it knew about loyalty, courage, and second chances. Twilight settled over Oak Ridge as Emma and Maverick made their way through the residential neighborhoods bordering Memorial Park. The German Shepherd moved with purpose despite his worsening limp, occasionally pausing to check their surroundings with the heightened awareness of an animal accustomed to danger. Emma matched his cautious pace, staying close to hedgerows and fences that offered concealment from passing cars. "We need to cut through Willowbrook Lane," she whispered to Maverick, who tilted his head as if processing her words. "It's longer, but safer than Main Street." The dog seemed to understand, adjusting his course to follow her lead. Emma marveled at his intelligence, the way he responded to her voice with the same focused attention he must have once given his handler. In the soft evening light, she could almost see the magnificent animal he had been before injury and abandonment had taken their toll. 3 blocks from her house, Emma spotted a familiar pickup truck idling at an intersection, Tyler's father's vehicle. Distinctive with its oversized tires and Confederate flag decal, she quickly ducked behind a parked car, pulling Maverick down beside her. The dog remained perfectly still, not even a whimper escaping despite the pressure on his injured leg. "They're looking for us," Emma whispered, her heart pounding. Through the truck's open window, she could hear Ashley's voice directing someone to check Wilson Street again. Maverick's ears pivoted forward, tracking the conversation with military precision. When the truck finally pulled away, he nudged Emma gently with his nose, urging her toward a narrow alley between houses, a route that would avoid the main road entirely. "You're right," she agreed, amazed at his tactical thinking. "That's safer." As they navigated the alley, Emma noticed Maverick's pace slowing, his breathing becoming more labored. The blood from his leg wound had formed a matted trail down his hind quarter, and his once precise movements were growing increasingly unsteady. Concern overrode her own fear as she knelt beside him, examining the injury more closely in the dimming light. "You need help," she murmured, unzipping her backpack to retrieve the small first aid kit she carried for Timmy's emergencies. Inside was a roll of gauze, antiseptic wipes, and medical tape basic supplies. But better than nothing. "This might hurt, but it will help stop the bleeding." Maverick stood perfectly still as she cleaned the wound, flinching only slightly when the antiseptic touched the raw flesh. His stoicism reminded Emma of her mother's stories about military patients, how the toughest soldiers often bore their pain in silence, eyes fixed on some distant point only they could see. "There," she said, securing the makeshift bandage around his leg. "It's not perfect, but it should help until we can get you to a vet." The dog's warm tongue gently licked her hand, once a gesture of trust that brought unexpected tears to Emma's eyes. In that moment, she made a silent promise to help this animal who had risked everything for her, though she had no idea how she would keep it. Sheriff Frank Donovan sat uncomfortably in Mayor Baker's wood-paneled office, acutely aware of the power dynamics at play. Richard Baker had removed his suit jacket, but kept his tie perfectly knotted. A man who believed appearances mattered above all else. The budget meeting had been brief and pointed a thinly veiled reminder of who controlled the town's purse strings. "One more thing before you go, Frank," Baker said, leaning back in his leather chair. "This business with the Wilson girl, it's just typical teenage rebellion. Nothing to waste department resources on." Donovan shifted in his seat. "Sir, she's only 11, and she's never been in trouble before." Baker waved a dismissive hand. "Kids grow up fast these days." "Probably met some boy. Lost track of time. You know how dramatic single-parent households can be no structure." The implied criticism of Sarah Wilson's parenting made Donovan's jaw tighten. He'd known Sarah since high school, remembered how she'd stayed in Oak Ridge to care for her parents while her classmates escaped to bigger cities. After her husband's death, she'd worked impossible hours to keep her family afloat, never once asking for help she knew wouldn't come. With all due respect, Mayor, Department Protocol. Protocol is subject to interpretation. Sheriff. Baker's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Especially when we're facing budget constraints. I'd hate to see us lose that new cruiser you've been requesting because resources were misallocated to non-emergencies." The threat hung in the air between them, clear as the hunting trophies mounted on the mayor's wall. Donovan thought of his deputies, their aging equipment, the promised salary increases. Then he thought of Emma Wilson's quiet determination in the town's Christmas pageant last year, how she'd helped Timmy with his lines when stage fright overwhelmed him. "I understand, sir," he said finally, the words leaving a bitter taste. We'll scale back the search to routine patrols. Baker nodded, satisfied. Good man. Now, Ashley mentioned something about a stray dog causing trouble in Memorial Park. Might be rabid. Have animal control look into it. Would you? At the Wilson house. Timmy sat by the front window, his small fingers worrying the edge of his inhaler. The afternoon doses of medication had helped temporarily, but his breathing was growing labored again as evening approached. Mrs. Grayson had fallen back asleep on the couch, her soft snores doing nothing to ease the boy's rising anxiety. When he spotted two figures moving carefully along the side of the house, Timmy's first instinct was fear, until he recognized his sister's familiar gait. He rushed to unlock the back door, nearly collapsing in relief as Emma slipped inside. "Emma, where were you? I was so scared and—" His words cut off abruptly at the sight of the large German shepherd limping in behind her. "You got a dog? This is Maverick," Emma explained quickly, helping Timmy back to the couch. "He saved me, but that's a long story. And first we need to get your medicine." "You're wheezing again." She moved efficiently through their evening routine, measuring Timmy's nebulizer treatment while simultaneously filling a bowl with water for Maverick. The dog settled himself near the door, eyes alert despite his exhaustion, positioning himself where he could monitor both the room and the approaches to the house. "He acts like Max from that military dog movie," Timmy observed between nebulizer breaths, his initial fear giving way to fascination. "That's because he is a military dog. Sort of." Emma adjusted the nebulizer mask on her brother's face. "He was a rescue dog in Houston. Remember that building collapse we learned about in school? He found 12 people in the rubble." Timmy's eyes widened. "For real? Then why is he all hurt and skinny?" The question hung in the air as Emma finished administering the treatment. She had wondered the same thing since recognizing Maverick in the park, how a celebrated hero could end up abandoned and injured, scrounging for survival in a town hundreds of miles from where he'd served. "I don't know," she admitted, "but he needs our help now. The same way he helped me." As Timmy's breathing eased, Emma recounted a sanitized version of the afternoon's events, careful to minimize the danger to avoid frightening her brother, even with her omissions. The story was enough to make Timmy regard Maverick with awestruck admiration. "He's like a superhero dog," the boy whispered, cautiously extending his hand toward Maverick, who gently sniffed his fingers before offering a soft lick of acceptance. The moment of connection was interrupted by Coach Miller's distinctive knock at the front door. Maverick immediately tensed, positioning himself between the children and the potential threat, a low rumble building in his chest. "It's okay," Emma reassured him, recognizing the knock pattern. "He's a friend." Coach Miller's weathered face registered first relief at seeing Emma, then surprise at the protective German shepherd watching him with intelligent wariness. "I see you've made a friend," he observed carefully, keeping his movements slow and deliberate as he entered. "This is Maverick," Timmy announced proudly. "He's a hero dog who saved Emma from bullies." The librarian's eyes narrowed slightly as he assessed the dog's condition. The fresh bandage on his leg, the scarred muzzle, the two prominent ribs visible beneath matted fur. Then he noticed the faded tag on Maverick's collar. An understanding dawned in his expression. "Houston Emergency Response. he read aloud, kneeling slowly to meet the dog at eye level. "I thought you looked familiar. You're the one who found all those people after the Grand Plaza collapse." Maverick's ears perked forward at the recognition, some invisible tension releasing from his powerful frame. Coach Miller extended his hand palm down, allowing the dog to sniff him thoroughly before attempting any contact. "I've been looking everywhere for you, Emma," Coach said, maintaining a calm tone that belied his concern. "What happened today?" "The truth. Please." Emma hesitated, glancing at Timmy. But Coach Miller shook his head. "Your brother deserves to know what's happening. Keeping him in the dark won't protect him." So Emma told the full story, Ashley's demand for prescription medications, the threat against Timmy, the hours tied to the tree in Memorial Park, and Maverick's unexpected intervention. As she spoke, Coach's expression darkened, the lines around his mouth deepening into furrows of controlled anger. "And Sheriff Donovan wouldn't listen to you this morning," he concluded, more statement than question. "He said she was probably just skipping school," Timmy confirmed, his small face serious. "But Emma never skips school. Never ever." Coach Miller's military background had taught him to recognize patterns of corruption, how power insulated itself, how vulnerable people became invisible when their suffering threatened someone's comfort. He'd seen it in Vietnam, where certain officers could make investigations disappear with a phone call. He was seeing it now in Oak Ridge. "We need to call your mother," he decided, pulling out his cell phone. "She can't leave work," Emma reminded him. "Dr. Reynolds wouldn't let her go when you called earlier. He said teenagers always test boundaries." "Did he now?" Coach's voice took on a dangerous edge. Interesting that the hospital administrator would personally intervene in a missing child case. He dialed Sarah's number, but the call went straight to voicemail. "Sarah, it's Benjamin Miller. Emma's safe at home now, but there's something bigger happening. Call me as soon as you can. Don't discuss this with anyone at the hospital." As he pocketed his phone, Coach noticed Maverick had moved to the window, his posture alert despite his obvious exhaustion. The dog's ears were forward, tracking something outside that human senses couldn't detect. "Someone's coming," Coach interpreted, moving quickly to dim the lights. "Timmy, Emma, stay away from the windows." Maverick confirmed the assessment with a low, warning growl, not the aggressive sound he'd made in the park, but a controlled alert meant to communicate danger to his people. Emma felt a chill at how quickly the dog had integrated himself into their protection, as if he'd been guarding them all along. Through a gap in the curtains, Coach spotted a slow-moving SUV making its third pass along their street, the animal control vehicle, but moving with a deliberate surveillance pattern that had nothing to do with catching strays. "Mayor's already looking for your four-legged friend," he murmured. "That was quick." "They can't take him," Timmy insisted, small fingers burying themselves in Maverick's fur. "He saved Emma, and they won't take him," Coach assured the boy, though the promise felt hollow against the reality of Oak Ridge politics. "But we need to be smart about this. Mayor Baker has a lot of influence in this town." Emma's face paled. "Ashley said she was calling her dad. She said it wasn't over." The pieces connected in Coach Miller's mind: the prescription drug request, the hospital administrator's unusual intervention, the mayor's sudden interest in a stray dog, the rushed budget meeting pulling Sheriff Donovan away from a missing child case, individual oddities that, when aligned, suggested something systemic and deliberate. "I need to make another call," he said. Stepping into the kitchen for privacy, this time he dialed a number rarely used, his former military police colleague who now worked for the State Police Narcotics Division. "Jim, it's Benjamin Miller from Oak Ridge. I think we might have something here you'd be interested in. Prescription drug distribution using middle school students as mules." While Coach handled the call, Emma checked Maverick's bandage, concerned by the blood already seeping through the gauze. The dog's temperature felt elevated, his breathing slightly too rapid, signs of infection beginning to take hold. "He needs antibiotics," she worried aloud, "and proper wound care." "Mom could help," Timmy suggested. "She fixes people at the hospital." "She can't leave work," Emma reminded him, though the idea planted a seed in her mind. The 24-hour pharmacy on Oak Street would have what Maverick needed, basic supplies at least. With her mother's nursing background, Emma had absorbed enough medical knowledge to know what to ask for. When Coach returned, his expression was grim but determined. "State police are interested, but they need more evidence before they can intervene in local jurisdiction. They're sending someone tomorrow to take statements." "Maverick needs medicine tonight," Emma told him, resolve strengthening her voice. "He's getting a fever. The cut is infected." Coach assessed the dog's condition with experienced eyes, noting the subtle signs of deterioration that might not be obvious to others. "You're right. But with animal control looking for him, and Mayor Baker's people watching your house, a vet visit would be risky." "The all-night pharmacy," Emma suggested. "They have basic antibiotics and better bandages. I know what to ask for." The old librarian considered the options, weighing the dangers against Maverick's worsening condition. "It's not safe for you to go out again tonight, Emma." "But it's because of me that he's hurt worse," she insisted. "He saved me. Coach, I can't just let him suffer." Timmy, who had been listening quietly, suddenly spoke up. "What about Maverick's owner, the J. Myers person on his tag? Maybe they could help." Coach's expression softened at the boy's logic. "That's good thinking. Timmy, let me see what I can find out." A quick internet search revealed the tragic ending to Maverick's original story, how handler Jake Myers had died in the final rescue attempt at the Grand Plaza collapse, how the traumatized dog had been deemed unadoptable after weeks of depression and anxiety, how he had eventually been transferred to a shelter in another state. There was no owner to call for help. The knowledge settled heavily over the room. Emma placed a protective hand on Maverick's head, feeling the subtle tremors now running through his powerful frame. The dog who had saved 12 strangers, who had been celebrated across national news, who had risked his life again today. For a girl he didn't know, this hero was now fighting for his own life on their living room floor. "We have to help him ourselves," she decided, a new determination in her voice. "Timmy needs his evening medication in an hour. We'll go to the pharmacy then, get everything at once." Coach Miller recognized the stubborn set of Emma's jaw, the same expression her mother wore when advocating for difficult patients. "Not alone," he said firmly. "I'll drive you." Outside, twilight had given way to true darkness, the kind that concealed movement but also hid potential threats. In the hospital across town, Sarah Wilson checked her silent phone during a rare bathroom break, unaware of the voicemails waiting behind the no-service message that had plagued the building's north wing for months. And in Mayor Baker's study, Ashley sat across from her father, recounting a version of the afternoon's events, that cast her as victim rather than aggressor. "A vicious stray attacked us at the park," she insisted, expertly forcing tears to her eyes. "We were just hanging out, and this huge German shepherd came out of nowhere. Emma Wilson was controlling it somehow." Richard Baker's politician's smile never wavered, though his eyes calculated costs and contingencies with each new detail. "And this happened after you refused to get prescription medications for her? How civic-minded of you, sweetheart." "I was trying to protect our community," Ashley replied, the practiced line sounding rehearsed even to her own ears. "Just like you always say we should." "Of course you were." The mayor reached for his phone, sending a quick text before returning his attention to his daughter. "Tell me again about this dog. Every detail you can remember." As night settled fully over Oak Ridge, the pieces of a conflict much larger than a schoolyard bullying incident were shifting into place. In the Wilson living room, Maverick drifted in and out of uneasy sleep, his training keeping him partially alert despite fever and pain. Whenever he startled awake, he immediately sought out Emma and Timmy, confirming their safety before allowing himself to rest again. Emma watched the loyal animal fighting to protect them even in his weakened state, and made a promise both to him and to herself. "We're going to fix this, Maverick. All of it. You're not alone anymore." The journey to Oak Ridge Pharmacy began at precisely 9:47 p.m., when Timmy's evening medication had been administered and Coach Miller's ancient Chevy truck had been positioned for a quick departure. Maverick, despite his worsening condition, insisted on accompanying them, rising shakily to his feet when Emma approached the door, his body language brooking no argument. "He won't stay behind," Emma explained, helping the dog into the truck's back seat. "He's still trying to protect us." Coach Miller nodded with understanding. Military working dogs are trained never to abandon their people. In his mind, you're his responsibility now. The night had brought a light drizzle to Oak Ridge, beating on windshields and softening the harsh glare of streetlights. Coach drove cautiously, taking side streets to avoid the town center where Sheriff Donovan's cruiser would likely be parked. The old librarian's hands were steady on the wheel, but his eyes constantly checked the mirrors, the vigilance of a man who had never fully left combat behind. "When we get there," he instructed, "you both stay in the truck with Maverick. I'll get what we need." Emma shook her head firmly. "The pharmacist knows me from getting Timmy's prescriptions. Mr. Peterson will be more likely to help if I explain about Maverick." The determined set of her jaw reminded Coach of another young woman he'd known decades ago, a field nurse in Vietnam who had navigated bureaucracy and battlefield conditions with equal tenacity to secure supplies for her patients. Sarah Wilson had passed more than her eye color to her daughter. "All right," he conceded, "but at the first sign of trouble, you get back to the truck. No arguments." Timmy leaned forward from the back seat, one hand resting protectively on Maverick's head. "Will the medicine really make him better, Emma?" His sister's confidence wavered momentarily as she glanced at the German shepherd's deteriorating condition. The dog's breathing had become more labored during the drive, his once alert eyes now glazed with fever. The makeshift bandage was soaked through, dark blood mingling with something more concerning the yellowish discharge of infection. "It will help," she answered carefully. "But he needs a vet. Timmy, real medical care." The 24-hour pharmacy stood as an island of fluorescent light in the otherwise darkened strip mall on Oak Street. Its windows advertised flu shots and discount prescriptions, promising relief for standard ailments in a town where anything more serious meant a 40-mile drive to the county hospital. As Coach pulled into the nearly empty parking lot, Emma spotted a familiar vehicle near the entrance, Dr. Reynolds's silver Mercedes. Its customized license plate, Doc James, unmistakable even in the dim light. "That's Mom's boss," she whispered, instinctively shrinking back in her seat. "The one who wouldn't let her leave work to look for me." Coach Miller's expression hardened as he parked at the far end of the lot, positioning his truck for a clear view of the pharmacy entrance. "Wait here. I want to see what our esteemed administrator is doing at a retail pharmacy at 10 o'clock at night." Through the rain-streaked windshield, they watched as Dr. Reynolds emerged from the pharmacy, accompanied by a man in his 20s wearing a white pharmacist's coat. The two spoke briefly before the younger man handed over a small paper bag. No money visibly changed hands. No prescriptions were presented, just a quick exchange followed by a familiar clap on the shoulder that spoke of regular arrangements. "That's not Mr. Peterson," Emma observed, referring to the elderly pharmacist who normally handled Timmy's medications. "I've never seen that guy before." "Neither have I," Coach agreed, his suspicion deepening as the young pharmacist glanced furtively around the parking lot before retreating inside. "Change of plans, Timmy. You stay in the truck with Maverick. Lock the doors. Emma and I will go in together." As they approached the pharmacy entrance, Emma noticed Coach's posture shifting subtly, shoulders squaring, stride lengthening, chin lifting to a precise angle that commanded attention without seeking it. It was the same transformation she'd seen when he addressed students who had crossed a serious line, the military bearing that made even teenage troublemakers fall silent. The fluorescent lighting inside was harsh after the dim comfort of the truck, making Emma blink as they navigated toward the pharmacy counter at the rear of the store. A bell chimed softly as they approached, summoning the young pharmacist they'd observed outside. His name tag read Jeff, with no last name provided. "Can I help you?" he asked, eyes flicking nervously between Emma and Coach Miller, lingering a moment too long on the older man's severe expression. "We need antibiotics and wound care supplies for a dog," Coach stated flatly, his tone suggesting this was a perfectly normal request. A large German shepherd with a deep leg laceration showing signs of infection. The pharmacist's demeanor shifted instantly from nervous to dismissive. "We don't carry veterinary medications. You'll need to go to an emergency vet clinic in Carlton." "Carlton is 30 miles away," Emma interjected, stepping forward. "We don't have time. He has a high fever and the wound is suppurating." Jeff blinked at her clinical terminology, clearly reassessing the situation. "Look, kid, I'm sorry about your dog, but I can't dispense antibiotics without a prescription. It's illegal. Yet you just gave Dr. Reynolds a package without seeing a prescription," Coach observed mildly, though his eyes had hardened to flints of steel. "Seems your interpretation of pharmacy regulations is somewhat flexible." The young man's face paled visibly. "He's a doctor. He has standing orders. I'm sure the State Pharmacy Board would be fascinated by these standing orders," Coach continued, leaning slightly forward. "Almost as fascinated as the DEA might be about prescription narcotics moving through Oak Ridge Middle School." The accusation hung in the air between them, transforming the mundane pharmacy into contested territory. Emma watched the pharmacist's face cycle through shock, fear, and calculation before settling into a wary resignation. "I don't know what you're talking about," he muttered, though his body language confessed everything his words denied. And I still can't give antibiotics for a dog. Emma felt desperation rising as she thought of Maverick waiting in the truck, his condition worsening with each passing minute. The heroic animal who had saved her might die because of human bureaucracy and corruption, a thought so unbearable she found herself speaking before considering the consequences. "My mother is Sarah Wilson," she said clearly. "She's a nurse at Oak Ridge Memorial. She always says silvasulfadiazine cream, oral amoxicillin, and proper wound cleaning can save a limb when nothing else is available." The mention of Sarah's name produced an unexpected reaction, a flicker of genuine concern crossing the pharmacist's face before he could mask it. "Sarah's your mom." His voice softened fractionally. "She helped my grandmother last year when no one else would take her seriously about her pain, made Dr. Reynolds order the tests that found her cancer early enough to treat." This human connection, this reminder that Oak Ridge was still small enough for personal histories to matter, shifted the atmosphere subtly. Jeff glanced toward the security camera in the corner, then back at Emma's pleading expression. "Wait here," he said finally, disappearing into the back room. When he returned moments later, he carried a small bag containing wound cleaning supplies, gauze, medical tape, and 2 unmarked bottles, one of cream, one of pills. "Basic first aid supplies," he announced loudly for the benefit of the security camera. "Available over the counter to anyone." Then, lowering his voice, he added, "The other items fell in by accident. Follow the standard dosing for the dog's estimated weight. And tell your mom," he hesitated, "tell her to be careful. There's something not right happening with the medication inventory at the hospital." Coach Miller nodded once, a soldier's acknowledgement of information received and understood. He paid for the first aid supplies, accepting the bag with a steady hand that belied the gravity of what had just transpired. As they turned to leave, the pharmacy door chimed again. Emma's heart froze as Ashley Baker entered, accompanied by her boyfriend Jason and another older boy she didn't recognize. The trio stopped abruptly, surprised by the unexpected encounter. "Well, look who it is." Ashley recovered quickly, her voice dripping with manufactured sweetness. "The charity case and her ancient bodyguard. Where's your rabid mutt? Emma Animal Control is looking for it. Daddy says it's a public health hazard." Coach Miller placed a protective hand on Emma's shoulder, steering her toward the exit. "Evening, Ms. Baker. We were just leaving." Jason stepped deliberately into their path, his earlier fear of Maverick apparently forgotten now that the dog was nowhere in sight. "Hey, we're talking to you." "No, you're not," Coach replied, his voice quiet but carrying an edge that made the teenager instinctively step back. "You're leaving a public place where you have no legitimate business at 10:30 on a school night. Unless you'd like me to call your football coach about curfew violations." The threat of athletic consequences accomplished what moral arguments couldn't. Jason's face flushed with anger, but he moved aside, pulling Ashley with him. "This isn't over," Ashley hissed as Emma passed. "My dad knows what you're trying to do. He knows about the dog." Emma kept walking, fixing her eyes on the exit, but Coach Miller paused just long enough to look back at the teenagers with an expression of profound disappointment. "Your father would do well to remember that his position isn't hereditary," he said simply, "and that even mayors answer to someone." The rain had intensified during their time in the pharmacy, drumming steadily on the truck's roof as they returned. Timmy's relieved face appeared at the window as he unlocked the doors, his small features tight with worry. "Maverick's really hot," he reported immediately. "And he made a weird sound when I touched his leg." Emma climbed quickly into the back seat, her heart sinking as she assessed the German shepherd's condition. Maverick's breathing had grown shallow and rapid, his powerful body trembling with fever. When he attempted to lift his head in greeting, the effort seemed almost too much, though his loyalty still drove him to acknowledge her return. "It's okay, boy," she soothed, carefully opening the package of supplies. "We're going to help you now." Under Coach Miller's steady dome light and Timmy's watchful gaze, Emma cleaned Maverick's wound with the antiseptic solution, working with the focused care she'd learned from years of assisting with Timmy's treatments. The dog remained stoically still despite the obvious pain, only a slight tremor in his muscles betraying his discomfort. "The infection is deep," Coach observed grimly as the cleaning revealed the angry, inflamed tissue beneath. "He must have been walking on this for weeks before it reopened today." Emma applied the silver sulfadiazine cream liberally, then wrapped the wound with fresh gauze and medical tape. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, each motion gentle but precise. Finally, she coaxed the correct dosage of antibiotic into Maverick's mouth. Wrapped in a small piece of beef jerky Coach had in his glove compartment. "Will it work fast enough?" Timmy asked, his voice small in the confined space of the truck. Before Emma could answer, the pharmacy door burst open again, Ashley and her companions spilling out into the rain. Even from a distance, their agitated conversation was visible, Ashley gesturing emphatically while speaking into her phone. Jason scanning the parking lot with obvious purpose. "They're looking for us," Coach concluded, starting the truck's engine. "Time to go." As they pulled carefully out of the lot, Emma noticed Ashley pointing directly at them, her expression triumphant even through the rain-streaked windows. Seconds later, the girl's phone returned to her ear, no doubt relaying their location to someone with the authority to act on the information. "We can't go back to the house," Coach decided, taking a sudden turn away from their planned route. "They'll be watching it now." "But Timmy needs his night medications," Emma protested, "and his nebulizer for sleeping." "We brought them," Timmy piped up, patting his small backpack. "I remembered when we were leaving. Like Emma always says, be prepared." Coach Miller's weathered face softened momentarily with approval. "Good man. Timmy. That's thinking ahead." As they drove through Oak Ridge's rain-slicked streets, avoiding main roads and keeping to the shadows where possible, Emma cradled Maverick's head in her lap. The dog's eyes remained fixed on her face despite his pain, a silent promise that whatever came next, they would face it together. "Where are we going?" she asked finally, as the familiar neighborhoods gave way to the town's outskirts. Coach checked his mirrors before answering, confirming they weren't being followed. "To the one place in Oak Ridge the mayor's influence doesn't reach, my fishing cabin on Stillwater Creek. It's not much, but it's defensible, and no one knows about it except a few trusted friends." As the truck turned onto a narrow gravel road, disappearing into the darkness of the pine forest beyond town limits, Emma felt a strange mixture of fear and hope. In the span of a single day, her ordinary life had transformed into something unrecognizable, yet somehow, with Maverick's steady presence against her side and Coach Miller's determined guidance, she felt less alone than she had in years. Coach Miller's fishing cabin materialized out of the darkness like a mirage, a small, weathered structure nestled among towering pines at the edge of Stillwater Creek. Its wooden walls had withstood decades of seasons, the porch sagging slightly but sturdy, windows dark until Coach flipped a switch that brought a generator humming to life in the rear of the property. "It's not much," he apologized, helping Timmy from the truck while Emma coaxed Maverick's weakened form from the back seat. "But it's off the grid and warm." Inside, the cabin smelled of wood smoke and old books. Its single room divided naturally into living and sleeping areas. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, flanked by bookshelves stuffed with dog-eared paperbacks and military histories. Coach quickly built a fire while Emma settled Maverick on a worn, braided rug before the hearth, Timmy hovering anxiously nearby. "He's getting worse?" Emma whispered, her voice catching as she felt the heat radiating from the German shepherd's body. Despite the antibiotics and fresh bandages, Maverick's breathing had grown increasingly labored during the drive, each exhalation carrying a subtle whine that spoke of deepening pain. Coach knelt beside them, his weathered hand gentle as he checked the dog's pulse at the neck. The rhythm was too rapid, too irregular, a body fighting desperately against infection that had gained too much ground. "Let me make a call," he said, stepping onto the porch where his ancient flip phone might catch a signal. Through the window, Emma watched his silhouette pacing back and forth, shoulders tense with urgency she'd never before seen in the normally unflappable librarian. Timmy sat cross-legged beside Maverick, small fingers combing gently through the dog's fur, avoiding the places where scars and newer wounds marked his battle-worn body. "You're gonna be okay," he told the dog with a child's determined optimism. "Emma fixed me when I got real sick last winter. She can fix you too." But Emma felt the weight of helplessness pressing against her chest as she watched Maverick struggle for each breath. The dog who had faced down Ashley's gang without hesitation, who had guided her safely home despite his pain, was slipping away before her eyes. When he managed to lift his head slightly at the sound of Coach returning, the effort cost him visibly, his muzzle dropping back to the rug with a soft thump that broke something inside her. "I've got a friend coming," Coach announced, his voice deliberately steady. "Former combat medic who works with the K-9 units at the state police now. He's bringing supplies." "When?" Emma asked, not taking her eyes from Maverick. "About an hour, maybe longer with the rain." The unspoken question hung between them. Would the dog survive that long? Maverick's eyes found Emma's face, holding her gaze with an intelligence that transcended species. In that moment, she felt she could read his thoughts as clearly as if he'd spoken them, not fear of his own suffering, but concern for her safety, for Timmy's. Even now, his loyalty remained absolute. "Do you think he remembers his handler?" she asked softly. "The one who died." Coach settled into his armchair with a creak of old springs. Military working dogs never forget their partners. That bond, it's something civilian folks can't quite understand. The fire popped and hissed, casting Maverick's shadow long against the cabin wall as Coach's voice dropped into the storytelling cadence of a man revisiting his own past. "When I was in Vietnam, our unit had a German shepherd named Rex. Looked a bit like your Maverick here, though not as smart. Rex's handler stepped on a mine during a patrol. Died instantly. That dog wouldn't leave his body, not for commands, not for food, not even when enemy fire started coming in. Took 3 men to physically drag him away. Emma tried to imagine Maverick's devotion to Jake Myers, the handler whose name was etched on his faded tag. How bewildering it must have been for the dog when Jake never returned, when the familiar routines of working life suddenly disappeared, when he found himself alone in a shelter far from everything he knew. That's why he was so sad they couldn't keep him, she realized. After Houston, he was mourning. Coach nodded. Dogs like Maverick, they're bred and trained for partnership, being separated from their purpose. It's like losing part of themselves. A violent tremor suddenly passed through Maverick's body, his back legs stiffening as a cry of pain escaped him before he could suppress it. Emma reached for him instinctively, cradling his large head in her lap as he panted through the spasm. "Shh! It's okay," she soothed, though tears were streaming freely down her face now. "You're not alone anymore. We've got you." Timmy began to cry quietly, his small shoulders shaking as he pressed himself against his sister's side. "He can't die. Emma, he just found us." The simple truth in her brother's words unleashed something in Emma, all the fear and rage she'd suppressed through the day's events suddenly overflowing. "It's not fair. He's a hero. He saved me. He saved all those people in Houston. And nobody even cared what happened to him. They just threw him away when he got hurt. Like he didn't matter anymore." Her voice broke on the last words, her fingers curling protectively in Maverick's fur. The parallel to her own family's situation wasn't lost on her, how her mother worked endless shifts, healing others, while the town ignored Timmy's needs, how they'd become invisible once they could no longer maintain appearances after her father's death. Coach Miller watched the girls break down with the steady compassion of someone who understood that some griefs must be fully expressed before healing can begin. When her sobs finally quieted, he spoke with gentle certainty. "People fail each other, Emma. They always have. But what matters is finding the ones who don't, the ones who stay." Maverick's breathing had grown shallower, each inhalation a visible struggle against pain and exhaustion. His eyes remained fixed on Emma's face. However, as if memorizing her features or perhaps offering comfort to her even as his own strength failed. "Mom doesn't even know where we are," Timmy whispered, the realization seemingly just dawning on him. "She'll be so scared when she gets home." The mention of Sarah sent a fresh wave of worry through Emma. Her mother would have finished her shift by now, would have returned to an empty house with signs of hasty departure. What would she think? Who would she call for help in a town where official channels were compromised, as if conjured by their concern? Headlights suddenly swept across the cabin windows, not approaching up the main drive, but cutting through the trees from an unexpected angle. Coach was on his feet instantly, moving to the window with the silent efficiency of a man who had never fully left combat behind. "Stay with Maverick," he instructed, reaching for an old baseball bat propped beside the door. "Could be my friend David, but he wouldn't come from that direction." Emma pulled Timmy closer as the vehicle outside fell silent, its lights extinguishing to leave only the soft patter of rain on the cabin roof. Maverick, sensing the tension, attempted to rise despite his condition, a protective instinct so deeply ingrained that even his failing body responded to perceived threat. "No, boy, stay," Emma whispered, gently restraining him as his legs buckled under his own weight. "We'll handle this." The dog's collapse seemed to drain whatever reserves of strength had been sustaining him. His massive head grew heavy against Emma's leg, his breathing increasingly erratic. Timmy began to sob again, pressing his face against Maverick's neck. "Please don't go," the boy begged. "Please stay with us." From outside came the sound of a car door closing, followed by hurried footsteps on the porch. Coach positioned himself before the door, bat raised, as 3 sharp knocks broke the silence. "Benjamin, it's Sarah Wilson. I know my children are in there with you." Emma's heart leapt at her mother's voice, relief and fresh worry colliding. Coach lowered the bat immediately, opening the door to reveal Sarah standing in the rain, her nurse's scrubs still on beneath her coat, her face drawn with exhaustion and fear. "Thank God," she breathed, rushing past Coach to gather her children in her arms. "I've been looking everywhere." Her words cut off abruptly as she registered Maverick's condition. The medical professional in her immediately assessed what Emma had been dreading to acknowledge. The dog was dying before their eyes. "He saved me, Mom," Emma explained through fresh tears. "Ashley Baker and her friends tied me up in the park, and Maverick found me. He fought them off even though he was already hurt. And now—" Sarah's training took over. She knelt beside the German shepherd, checking his gums, feeling his pulse, examining the bandaged leg with practiced efficiency. "Septicemia," she diagnosed grimly. "The infection's in his bloodstream now. He needs IV antibiotics, fluids, proper surgical debridement." Her voice faltered as she met her daughter's pleading gaze. "Emma, honey, he needs a veterinary hospital. Even then, with how advanced this is, we can't let him die," Emma insisted, her voice breaking. "Not after everything he did. Not like this." As if understanding their conversation, Maverick summoned his remaining strength to lift his head one final time, gently licking Emma's hand, a gesture of comfort, of absolution, of goodbye. Then his eyes drifted closed, his massive body going still save for the increasingly shallow rise and fall of his chest. Timmy's sobbing filled the cabin as Emma gathered the dying dog closer, her tears falling into his fur. In that moment, all the injustices of Oak Ridge seemed embodied in Maverick's fate, how goodness was discarded, how loyalty went unrewarded, how power protected itself at the expense of the vulnerable. "It's not fair," she whispered again, the words inadequate against the weight of her grief. "It's just not fair." The silence in Coach Miller's cabin was broken by a second vehicle approaching this one following the proper access road, its headlights sweeping methodically through the trees. Sarah tensed instinctively, her arms tightening around her children as Coach moved again to the window. "It's David," he confirmed, relief evident in his voice. "My friend from the K-9 unit." The man who emerged from the state police SUV moved with military precision despite the rain and darkness, tall and broad-shouldered, with close-cropped salt-and-pepper hair. David Mercer carried a large medical kit and what appeared to be an IV stand. His expression remained professionally neutral as Coach ushered him inside. Though his eyes widened slightly at the tableau before the fireplace, a family clustered protectively around the still form of a German shepherd. "This, the dog?" he asked unnecessarily, already kneeling to examine Maverick. "His name's Maverick," Timmy supplied through tears. "He's a hero." Something in the boy's simple declaration seemed to register with Mercer. His hands stilled momentarily on Maverick's neck, where he'd been checking for a pulse. Maverick, he repeated, reaching for the tag on the dog's worn collar. As he read the faded inscription, his professional demeanor cracked visibly. Houston Emergency Response. Wait, is this the Maverick from the Grand Plaza collapse? Coach nodded. The very same. Been living as a stray here in Oak Ridge for months. Apparently. Saved Emma today from some local trouble. Mercer's face hardened with renewed purpose as he opened his medical kit. Then we're not losing him. Not on my watch. He glanced at Sarah, noting her scrubs. You medical RN at Oak Ridge Memorial, she confirmed. Good. I need an assistant. Everyone else, give us space. What followed was a blur of urgent medical intervention. Mercer established an IV line with practiced ease, hanging a bag of fluids from the portable stand while Sarah monitored Maverick's vital signs. Coach led Emma and Timmy to the small kitchen area, making hot chocolate that went untouched as they watched the desperate attempt to save their newfound protector. Broad-spectrum antibiotics, Mercer explained as he injected medication into the IV port. Fluids for the dehydration, pain management, but we need to clean that wound properly. What he meant became clear as he unpacked surgical instruments from his kit scalpel, forceps, irrigation syringes. This is going to be rough without proper anesthesia. He's weak enough that he probably won't fight, but we'll help, Emma volunteered, returning to Maverick's side. She positioned herself near his head, gently stroking his muzzle while whispering reassurances. Timmy knelt beside her, small hands resting lightly on the dog's shoulder. The procedure that followed tested everyone's endurance. Mercer worked methodically to debride the infected tissue, his hands steady despite the less-than-ideal conditions. Sarah assisted with the precision of a surgical nurse, anticipating needs before they were voiced. Through it all, Maverick remained eerily still, only occasional tremors revealing his semi-conscious state. He's a fighter, Mercer observed after an hour of intensive treatment. Most dogs would have succumbed to this infection days ago. Will he make it? Emma asked, her voice small in the firelit cabin. The former combat medic didn't offer false reassurance. The next few hours are critical. We've done what we can with field treatment. He needs a veterinary hospital, specialized care. We can't take him to a vet here, Coach explained, briefly outlining the situation with Mayor Baker in the search for Maverick. Animal Control's looking for him specifically. Mercer's expression darkened. So a heroic service dog is being hunted because he interfered with some small-town corruption. That's not happening on my watch. He pulled out his phone, stepping onto the porch for privacy as he made a call. In his absence, Sarah finally asked the question that had been building since her arrival. Emma, I need you to tell me exactly what happened today. Everything. So Emma recounted the full story: Ashley's demand for prescription medications, the threats against Timmy, the hours tied to the tree, and Maverick's rescue. As she spoke, her mother's expression transformed from concern to cold fury. They wanted you to steal narcotics from the hospital, Sarah clarified, her voice dangerously calm. And when you refused, they abducted you. Ashley said her dad needed them, Emma added quietly. That it was family business. Sarah and Coach exchanged a significant look over the children's heads. That explains a lot, Sarah murmured. The inventory discrepancies I've been reporting for months. The missing fentanyl patches from the oncology floor. Dr. Reynolds kept dismissing it as clerical errors. The cabin door opened as Mercer returned, his face set with determination. I've called in some favors. There's a veterinary specialist meeting us at the State Police Barracks in Carlton. It's about 30 miles from here. But they have proper surgical facilities, and it's outside Mayor Baker's jurisdiction. I'll drive, Coach offered immediately. No, Mercer countered. You all stay here. I'll take the dog myself in my vehicle. It's officially marked law enforcement. No one will stop it. He hesitated, glancing at the children's anxious faces. I understand you want to stay with him, but this is the safest option. For everyone. Emma felt the protest rising in her throat, but her mother's gentle hand on her shoulder stopped her. He's right, sweetheart. The most important thing is getting Maverick proper care quickly. We need to trust Officer Mercer. Reluctantly, Emma nodded, kneeling once more beside Maverick. The German shepherd's eyes fluttered open briefly at her touch, recognition flickering in their amber depths. You're going to get help now, she whispered, pressing her forehead gently against his. Real help, and then you're coming home with us. I promise. The process of transferring Maverick to Mercer's vehicle was delicate. Coach and Mercer fashioned a makeshift stretcher from an old blanket, carrying the sedated dog carefully through the rain. Emma and Timmy watched from the porch, hands clasped tightly together as the SUV's taillights disappeared into the darkness. He'll call as soon as there's news, Coach assured them, ushering everyone back inside where the fire had burned down to glowing embers. With Maverick gone, the reality of their situation settled heavily in the cabin. Sarah sank into Coach's armchair, the adrenaline that had sustained her finally ebbing to reveal bone-deep exhaustion. I need to make some calls, she said, pulling out her phone. The hospital board needs to know what's happening with Dr. Reynolds, and I should contact Sheriff Donovan. Frank's compromised, Coach interrupted gently. Baker's got him buried under budget threats and who knows what else. We need to go above his head. I already have, a new voice announced from the doorway. They turned to find Sheriff Donovan himself standing there, rain dripping from his uniform hat. Expression grim but determined. No one had heard his approach over the storm. How did you find us? Coach demanded, instinctively moving between the sheriff and the Wilson family. Followed Sarah from town, Donovan admitted. Not to bring you in to warn you. He removed his hat, revealing a man who seemed to have aged years in a single day. Things are unraveling fast, Ben. After you left the pharmacy, I got an anonymous call about prescription fraud at the hospital. Then one of my deputies reported Mayor Baker's private security hassling kids at the middle school, asking about Emma. He paused, seeming to gather himself. I've been looking the other way too long, telling myself it was just small-town politics, that some compromises were necessary. But using children as drug mules, hunting down a little girl for refusing to cooperate, that crosses every line I've got left. The sheriff's confession hung in the air, its sincerity evident in his haggard face and slumped shoulders. Sarah studied him for a long moment before speaking. What did you do? Frank. Called the state police myself. He answered simply. Gave them everything I had on Baker's operation, the irregular prescriptions, the hospital connection, the pressure on department resources. They're setting up a sting operation as we speak. Coach's eyebrows rose in surprise. "That's career suicide in Oak Ridge." "Probably," Donovan agreed with a wry smile. "But I've been sheriff for 18 years. Might be time to remember why I took the badge in the first place." As if summoned by this rekindling of integrity, Donovan's radio crackled to life with an urgent dispatch. "All units, be advised, state police executing search warrants at Oak Ridge Memorial Hospital and the Baker residence. Local assistance requested for perimeter control only. Repeat, state police have primary jurisdiction." The cabin fell silent as the implications sank in. After months, perhaps years of unchecked corruption, justice was finally penetrating Oak Ridge's carefully maintained facade. "It's really happening," Sarah whispered, reaching for her children's hands. "They're going to be held accountable." Emma should have felt triumph at this news, but her thoughts remained with Maverick, fighting for his life in a veterinary clinic 30 miles away. What good was justice if the one who had catalyzed it didn't survive to see it? As if reading her thoughts. Sheriff Donovan's radio crackled again, this time with a different kind of message. "Dispatch to Sheriff Donovan. Priority message from State Police Officer Mercer regarding K-9 transport." Donovan unclipped his radio, bringing it closer to where Emma and Timmy waited with barely contained anxiety. "Donovan receiving. Go ahead. K-9 subject stable following emergency procedure," came the clinical response. "Specialist reports guarded optimism for recovery with proper care. Requesting permission to release information to civilians accompanying subject." "Permission granted," Donovan replied, a small smile softening his weathered face as he watched relief flood through Emma. K-9 Maverick's identity confirmed through microchip. Houston Emergency Response has been notified of recovery. Director requests immediate video conference with current guardians. Emma's confusion must have shown on her face, because Donovan explained gently, "They want to talk to you." "Emma." "About Maverick." "But why?" she asked, struggling to process this unexpected development. Coach Miller's expression showed dawning understanding. "Because Maverick wasn't just any rescue dog, Emma. He was considered the best of his generation, a K-9 officer decorated for extraordinary service. His disappearance after Jake Myers' death wasn't just a local loss, it was national news in service animal circles." Sarah checked her phone, which was suddenly receiving a flood of notifications now that they'd moved within cell service range. "It's all over social media already," she confirmed with astonishment. "Someone at the state barracks must have recognized him and posted about it. Hero rescue dog recovered after years missing. There's a video from the Houston collapse going viral again." The cabin door burst open once more as David Mercer returned much sooner than expected. His expression was no longer professionally neutral, but openly animated. "You need to see this," he announced, holding up his tablet. On the screen was a news broadcast, hastily assembled, but airing on the local affiliate. The caption read, "Breaking corruption probe in Oak Ridge leads to recovery of hero service dog." Beneath the sensational headline was footage of Maverick in his prime, a magnificent German shepherd in working harness, confidently leading rescue workers to survivors in the Houston rubble. The image cut to a photograph of Emma from a school function, identified as the young girl who recognized and saved the forgotten hero. The stories exploded, Mercer explained. Houston Emergency Response has been looking for Maverick since he disappeared from that shelter in Georgia. They never stopped searching, and now that they know where he is and what he did for Emma, he trailed off, seeming uncharacteristically emotional. What? Emma prompted, her heart racing. What do they want? They want to honor him, Mercer replied simply. And they want to thank the girl who recognized his worth when everyone else had forgotten it. As the implications of this revelation settled over the cabin, Sheriff Donovan's radio delivered the final piece of news that completed their transformation from victims to victors. All units be advised, Richard Baker in custody. Evidence of extensive prescription drug trafficking recovered from residents. Dr. James Reynolds cooperating with authorities. Multiple arrests expected by morning. The justice Emma had thought secondary to Maverick's survival now revealed itself as inextricably linked to it, a symmetry so perfect it seemed almost scripted. The dog who had been discarded after losing his purpose had found new meaning in saving her, and in doing so had inadvertently exposed the corruption poisoning their town. It seems, Coach Miller observed quietly, that heroes have a way of finding each other even across species, even against impossible odds. As dawn approached, bringing with it the promise of a transformed Oak Ridge, Emma finally allowed herself to believe that Maverick might indeed come home not as a discarded hero, but as a rediscovered one whose true value had never diminished, only been temporarily forgotten by a world too busy to remember what really matters. 2 months later, Memorial Park looked nothing like the place where Emma had been held captive. Summer had transformed the ancient oaks into vibrant canopies of green, dappling the freshly mowed grass with patterns of sunlight and shadow. The abandoned clearing where Ashley Baker and her friends had tied Emma to a tree was now occupied by a semicircle of folding chairs and a small podium draped with the Oak Ridge town flag. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Sarah Wilson asked, straightening Emma's collar as they waited behind a temporary partition. "No one would blame you if you changed your mind." Emma shook her head, determination evident in the set of her jaw, an expression increasingly familiar to those who knew her. "Maverick didn't give up on me. I'm not giving up on telling his story." At her side, the German shepherd in question sat alertly, his once matted coat now gleaming in the summer sunlight. Though still leaner than he had been in his prime, Maverick's health had been fully restored through weeks of intensive veterinary care. Only the persistent limp in his right hind leg remained as evidence of his ordeal and the protective watchfulness with which he regarded the Wilson family. "You look mighty fine, both of you," came Coach Miller's voice as he approached, dressed in a pressed suit that made him appear even more military than his usual librarian attire. "Quite a turnout today." Beyond their waiting area, several hundred people had gathered for what the new acting mayor had dubbed Oak Ridge Heroes Day. The crowd included not just local residents but news crews from as far away as Houston, state police officers in dress uniforms, and representatives from various canine and rescue organizations across the country. "Is Timmy ready?" Emma asked, peering around for her brother. "Ready and excited," Sarah confirmed. "Mrs. Peterson is keeping an eye on him in the front row. His new medication is working wonders. He hasn't needed the nebulizer in 3 weeks." The changes in the Wilson family's circumstances had been as dramatic as the changes in Oak Ridge itself. Following Mayor Baker's arrest and the exposure of the prescription drug ring operating through Oak Ridge Memorial, the hospital board had undertaken a complete administrative overhaul. Sarah's diligence in reporting inventory discrepancies had been recognized with a promotion to nursing supervisor, a position that came with regular hours and comprehensive family health insurance that finally covered Timmy's specialized treatments. The temporary partition shifted as Sheriff Donovan joined them, his uniform freshly pressed for the occasion, though he had submitted his resignation following the scandal. The county commissioners had refused to accept it, instead commending his ultimate decision to contact state authorities. "They're ready for you now," he informed them, offering Emma an encouraging smile. "Just like we practiced." "Okay." Emma nodded, taking a deep breath as she smoothed her hand over Maverick's head. The German shepherd responded by pressing closer to her side, his warm presence steadying her nerves as they had steadied each other through the tumultuous weeks following their ordeal. The crowd fell silent as Emma and Maverick emerged, walking side by side toward the podium. From the front row, Timmy gave an enthusiastic thumbs up, his cheeks flushed with excitement rather than fever. Beside him sat Officer Mercer and Dr. Kathleen Winters, the veterinary specialist who had performed the surgery that saved Maverick's life. "Ladies and gentlemen," the acting mayor began, "we gather today to honor extraordinary courage in ordinary circumstances, the kind of courage that reminds us what community should truly mean." As the mayor spoke about Oak Ridge's new chapter and renewed commitment to transparency, Emma found herself reflecting on how much had changed since that afternoon in the park. Ashley Baker and her family had moved away following her father's arrest, her social media account suddenly silent after years of carefully curated superiority. Dr. Reynolds was cooperating with federal authorities, his testimony helping to dismantle a prescription drug operation that extended far beyond Oak Ridge's borders. The middle school had implemented new anti-bullying protocols, with Coach Miller serving as student advocate. But most meaningful to Emma was the change in how Oak Ridge saw itself, the uncomfortable self-examination that had followed the exposure of corruption in their midst. Neighbors who had once looked away now made eye contact, offered help, acknowledged the struggles of families like hers instead of pretending prosperity was universal. "And now," the mayor concluded, "I'd like to introduce Emma Wilson, whose courage and compassion remind us what true heroism looks like." The applause that greeted Emma as she approached the microphone was warm and genuine. Maverick remained steadfastly by her side, his training allowing him to ignore the crowd and cameras as he focused solely on supporting his person. "Thank you all for coming today," Emma began, her voice stronger than she had expected. "But I'm not the hero of this story. Neither is Maverick, though he certainly saved my life." She paused, gathering her thoughts as she had practiced with Coach Miller. "The real hero is second chances, and the people brave enough to offer them." She told the story simply, without embellishment, how a discarded rescue dog had found her when she most needed help, how his intervention had uncovered corruption that had poisoned their town for years, how his loyalty had reminded everyone what service really meant. "Maverick lost everything," she continued, her hand resting lightly on the dog's shoulder. "His handler, his purpose, his home. He was injured and abandoned, left to survive alone, but he never lost his core, his instinct to help others, even at cost to himself." The crowd had grown utterly silent, captivated by the wisdom emerging from this 11-year-old girl and the dignified dog beside her. "I think there's a lesson there for all of us," Emma concluded, "about who we choose to be when no one's watching, about how we treat those who can no longer serve our purposes, about remembering what matters when everything else falls away." As she stepped back from the microphone, the applause was thunderous. Maverick, sensing the completion of her task, gently pressed against her leg, his subtle way of signaling support and pride. The ceremony continued with the presentation of a special commendation from the Houston Emergency Response Unit and the unveiling of a small bronze plaque that would mark the entrance to what would now be called Second Chance Park. But for Emma, The most significant moment came afterward, when she and Maverick led her family back to their home, not the small, struggling house they had once occupied, but a comfortable bungalow closer to the school, provided through a community fundraiser organized by Coach Miller and his veterans group. On the front porch hung a custom-made wooden sign, "The Wilsons and Maverick." The German Shepherd paused before it, seeming to read the words that officially recognized what had been true since that fateful day in the park. He had found his new family, his new purpose, his new beginning. "Well, I'll be a monkey's uncle," their elderly neighbor Mr. Jenkins called from across the street, his cane raised in greeting. "If that ain't the perfect picture of what's right with this world, I don't know what is. A brave girl, a loyal dog, and a fresh start that's something worth celebrating, sure as sunshine." As they settled on the porch swing, Sarah, Emma, Timmy, and Maverick arranged in comfortable proximity, Emma reflected on how the worst day of her life had somehow led to this moment of perfect contentment. The German Shepherd's head rested lightly on her lap, his eyes half closed in contentment but still watchful, always watchful. "You know," Sarah observed, watching a monarch butterfly dance across their new garden, "some folks might say it was just chance that brought Maverick to you that day in the park." Emma smiled, her fingers finding the spot behind Maverick's ears that made his tail thump gently against the porch boards. "It wasn't chance," she said, with the certainty of someone who had discovered an essential truth. "It was recognition. Two souls remembering what matters even when the rest of the world had forgotten." As twilight descended over their new beginning, Maverick shifted slightly to accommodate Timmy, who had drifted to sleep against his warm side. The German Shepherd's eyes met Emma's in the gathering dusk, and in that silent exchange was everything that needed saying: promises kept, loyalty honored, and the unspoken understanding that sometimes the most heroic act of all is simply refusing to give up on someone who needs you. In Oak Ridge, they would tell this story for years to come, how a forgotten hero and a determined girl had transformed a town by reminding it of its better self. But for Emma Wilson, the true miracle was simpler and more profound, the knowledge that even in our darkest moments, we are never truly alone as long as there are those human or canine who recognize our worth when we have forgotten it ourselves. Folks, remember when America valued loyalty above convenience, when we recognized that heroes come in all forms, even on four legs. Maverick's story isn't just about a remarkable dog. It's about what happens when we discard those who can no longer serve our purposes. How many veterans, how many loyal workers have we thanked with pink slips once their usefulness seemed diminished? This German Shepherd, abandoned after saving 12 lives and losing his handler, still chose to protect a child in danger despite his own suffering. That's the America we grew up believing in, where character outweighs circumstance, where we judge hearts, not appearances. Emma saw value in a limping stray when others saw only a nuisance. She recognized worth beneath the scars. As we navigate our golden years, sometimes feeling increasingly invisible in a youth-obsessed culture, Maverick's story reminds us that our value doesn't diminish with age or ability. Our wisdom, our loyalty, our capacity to care, these qualities only deepen with time.